10 years ago, on December 14th, 2012, 20 first graders and 6 teachers were massacred at Sandy Hook Elementary School. Today, Bishop Caggiano is joined by his friend Monsignor Robert Weiss, who was the pastor in Newtown that day and still is today. They're going to reflect on that tragic day as well as on Monsignor Weiss's 50 years as a priest. Please keep your radio tuned on 1350 AM and 103.9 FM, or keep us on your phone with the Veritas mobile app. The app is available at the Apple App Store, the Google Play Store, or veritascatholic.com. And Let Me Be Frank is brought to you by a grant from Foundations in Faith. Please keep 2 Foundations in Faith ministries in mind and give if you can. There's a big need being filled by the St. Francis Xavier Fund for Missionary Parishes, which supports vibrant inner-city parishes facing financial challenges. For example, the weather's getting colder, and many of our inner-city parishes have old boilers that are breaking down. The St. Francis Xavier Fund helps these parishes by providing new boilers to keep the heat on in the cold winter months. The second ministry is Foundations and Charities' Mental Health Matters campaign, which supports vital mental health services provided by Catholic Charities of Fairfield County. The need for mental health services really is truly great. Please help your fellow brothers and sisters in need by giving to this campaign. Helping is easy. Simply go to bridgeportdiocese.org and click on the Giving Tuesday link. Thanks for helping Foundations in Faith and Foundations in Charity. They're really providing essential services to the more vulnerable people and parishes right here in our community. Okay, welcome back everybody to Let Me Be Frank on the Veritas Catholic Network. I'm Steve Lee, and it is my great pleasure, as always, to introduce Bishop Frank Caggiano.
Steve, good to be with you, my friend. Here we are in the midst of Advent, getting ready, for Christmas.
Crazy. 2022 flew
before
by.
You know it. Yeah, it certainly did. But our obligation is to slow down and enjoy the season of Advent in its own right? So we haven't spoken about that. Maybe next time we gather, we'll talk a little bit more about Advent. Yeah. Because before it completed, this year we have the longest Advent possible because Christmas is Sunday. So it's the longest. Sometimes it's the shortest. If Christmas lands on a Monday, which is next year, you only got 3 weeks and 1 day, but we have 4 weeks to kind of use it to our benefit spiritually. So just a bit of a side homily.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, we have a very important guest.
It is my pleasure to introduce Monsignor Robert Weiss. Monsignor Weiss entered the seminary in New York right after high school and has served all over the diocese, from St. Andrews in Bridgeport, St. Leo's in Stamford, St. Jude's in Monroe, and St. Joseph's in Shelton. He landed at St. Rose of Lima in Newtown in 1999 and has been there ever since. And Monsignor is going to celebrate 50 years as a priest next year in 2023. This follows on his 75th birthday, which was just a few months ago. And many of our listeners know Monsignor Weiss as the pastor who shepherded his community through the tragedy at Sandy Hook, which was 10 years ago on December 14th. And on a personal note, I've come to know Monsignor Weiss over the past few years, and he is just a wonderful priest with about as big a heart as I've ever known in a person. So I'm blessed to know you, Monsignor. Welcome, and thank you for joining us on Let Me Be Frank.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Oh, Monsignor, it's a pleasure to have you here. You're a tremendous priest, a tremendous man of faith. And I'm going to ask you my very first question that I ask every person who comes on this podcast, particularly those who are clerics. And if you don't mind, to the extent that you are comfortable, tell us your vocation story, right? Because it may encourage some young men or men who are listening. Tell us how you got to be Monsignor Weiss.
Sure. Well, for me, it certainly had its roots in my family. My mother was raised Catholic. My father was not. And my grandfather wanted my mother to become a nun. And she just wanted to go to her prom. She didn't really have any interest in religious life. And so she made a novena to St. Anne. It was her own word. She said, "St. Anne, send me a man." And she met my dad. And the day before their wedding, my father surprised her. In those days, if you married a non-Catholic, you were married either outside the rail or in the rectory. And so she had bought a blue suit to get married on the rectory stairs. And my father said to her, I became a Catholic today so we can get married in church. And my father was an
Wow.
incredible, incredible Catholic man. As with many converts, especially in those times, they truly embraced and lived their faith. And so we were very much raised in a family that embraced the church with time, with talent, certainly with treasure. And I think it's from that very much that I kind of grew into an understanding of priesthood. My mother,
Mhm.
when I told her I was going to go into seminary, cried. And I thought it was tears of joy. She said, Bob, that's not good for you. You're not going to be happy. You like life too much. And she said, I'm not sure this is going to be the right vocation for you. But, in time, things changed. And certainly my mom became a great supporter for me. In fact, anybody that met my mother knew that she had a son who was a priest. And
So your mother and my mother must have been best friends now in heaven.
absolutely. But I think very much my vocation, I actually had I was senior class president, and I used to lead the prayers at high school every morning. And on senior skip day, I went to do the prayers. As I walked past our parish church, which was on the same campus as the high school, I literally heard a voice that said, be a priest. And for 3 or 4 days, I let that kind of wander around in my head until I went and approached my religion teacher, Father Bowles, and I had a conversation with him. Uh, I'm hesitant to say, but actually, what he did say, a unique approach to accepting vocation. Uh, but, he encouraged me and he said, the best thing to do is take the step forward. And he said, pray
Mhm.
God, you'll never take a step backward once you do. And I've
Mhm.
remembered that ever since. Certainly going to seminary back in the 60s at the height of the Second Vatican Council was a real challenge. We were transitioning constantly. And many of the priests who were teaching us in seminary were actually leaving the priesthood. And I entered with 104 men, 7 of whom were ordained, and only 3 of us are still in active ministry. It was really hard living through those times in formation. And then with the Second Vatican Council, Fulton Sheen was the bishop. I went to seminary in Rochester, New York, and he came to the seminary one day. He said, "Gentlemen, I know you're sitting in classes, but with moral theology changing, with sacramental theology changing, with canon law changing, you're not doing yourself any favors." So he said, "Let's be in the spirit of Vatican II and get out in the world." And so we were going to settlement houses. There was a great deal of race riots in Rochester at the time. We were down burned out areas. We were sent to hospitals, you name it. We were out in the world. And he said, that is where the ministry that you are going to embrace is going to take you. He said, the days of people knocking on the rectory door and you sitting there welcoming them, they're going away. We need to get out to meet the people where they are. And so Fulton Sheen really kind of changed the format of formation, at least those
Mhm.
few years.
Mhm.
Sadly, my scholastic ability is limited when it comes to theology because of that. But on the other hand, the way I've embraced my ministry has certainly been enhanced with that system.
Oh, no, without a doubt. I think there's not a person I know who has not encountered you who says that you have a genuine pastoral loving heart for the people, whoever happens to be in front of you, parishioner or non-parishioner, right? It's that's a tremendous testimony of being a good shepherd. But I did not know that you knew Fulton Sheen. So what was he like? Like, tell us really, what was he like?
You know what? I was appointed to be his librarian. That was my seminary mission, and I
Hmm.
spent every Tuesday and Thursday with Fulton Sheen. Uh, he lived in the Catholic Center actually on the third floor. Uh, he tried to make it look like a very lavish home, but it was very simple, very very simple, which I think that kind of confuses some people too about Fulton Sheen. And actually, he was shorter than I am, which many
Ah.
people don't realize. When he used to preach, he used to wear these long capes, but he stood on a box to give him some more height when he started.
Is that right?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, this is fascinating. What else?
And so there are 3 tables. He said, everybody that's Catholic that writes anything, they send it to me. And there had 3 tables. One table I was supposed to take to the incinerator, as they called it. The second one I was to distribute to the convents and the seminaries. And the third, he said, I'd like it a catalog, and I'm going to keep those. But I spent many, many hours with him. And so he was really a humble man. And he was a man very much ahead of his time. In fact, because of his attitude about housing, racial equality and things like
Hmm.
that. he was not very welcome in Rochester, and had a very short tenure there before he was returned to New York. But it was a
Hmm.
fabulous experience for me, for sure.
Oh my gosh, without a doubt. I mean, I only know of him from the YouTube videos now that are available, and his preaching and his writing,
Yeah,
which is tremendous, right?
right.
It's tremendous. Wow. And now your ministry in the diocese has brought you many different places, many different parishes. So you were pastor before you were pastor at St. Rose, you were pastor at St. Joseph's,
Correct.
correct?
Yeah.
In Shelton? Or the two places you have been pastor, Monsignor?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So tell us about ministry, your experience all these years. Now it's 50 long years of ministry. Tell us about it.
I can't help but be very reflective as I approach this anniversary, and I honestly sometimes don't even remember what I did do, and I'm always astounded when people will stop me and say, "Do you remember the day you talked at our church?" And you said something that I've kept with me all my life, and I said, "What did I say?" And it was sounded so beautiful. I said, "Are you sure I said that?" No. My main work really is with youth ministry. When I was first here in the diocese, youth ministry really didn't have a person in charge. So one of the other priests who unfortunately has left ministry, and I really worked hard developing the Emmaus ministry and developing ministry programs. We had huge rallies throughout the diocese. We were very attentive to the cultures. We had one event where we invited all the Hispanic parishes to provide the food, and the kids loved eating all this different cultural food. And so we
Hmm.
did a lot of great activities. So much of my priesthood as a parochial vicar was very focused on family and very focused on young people.
Hmm.
Becoming a pastor, I've been given two parishes that really wanted to be reignited. They really wanted to come alive and have activities that could involve them and involve the talents and gifts they had. So St. Joseph was my first experience, and I was there for 10 years. We had just paid off a rather substantial debt. Our school enrollment was over 500. We put up two new buildings, and the bishop invited me to leave to come to Newtown. And here, it's been a very different approach as well. We had some debt to deal with. We had some buildings that had a lot of need, and we didn't have enough space. We really have tried to enhance our campus to provide, many areas of activity, as well as now, as you know, host the food pantry for Newtown, which is
Hmm.
an incredible experience for our people. And seeing so many people come week after week after week, especially during this pandemic and following, has really been uplifting for the spirit of this parish.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, St. Rose is probably one of the most active parishes we have in the whole diocese. How many ministries, how many different activities are going on?
Well,
Can you
pre-pandemic, we had about 64 ministries going on here. I always say to everyone, the greatest weakness we give to the faith is our parking lot, because it's never empty. There's always something going on between the school, between our faith formation programs. But we really expanded following the tragedy at Sandy Hook, because the counselors who came to us from Yale said to us the best thing we could do to facilitate healing was to develop strong men's ministries, strong women's ministries, and strong youth ministry, because
Hmm.
everyone grieves very differently at a time like this. And so we put a
Hmm.
great deal of energy into doing just that, and those have really grown and expanded, and off of those, many other ministries have developed. So at the
Hmm.
present time, I'd say we've retrieved probably about 45 of our ministries. Some of them, I think it was time for them to take on a new look anyway. But
Hmm.
at the
Hmm.
present time, we're still have become very active.
You have a very large youth ministry at St. Rose, do you not? Like even just with the Knights of Columbus, I think you have the largest group of squires probably in the state of Connecticut. No?
Absolutely. I think I'm not sure. We were in competition with the Philippines for the largest group. Uh,
Oh, really?
yes, but we do have a significant number of young high school boys that participate in this, and I'll tell you, they are incredible. They wear their blue Squire shirts with great pride, and anytime we need a hand, you just pick up the phone, and
Yeah.
these guys are there for us. We're really blessed to them, and the young people today have hearts for service. I think that's really where they want to put a lot of their energy, and so
Uh-huh.
being a squire fits right into that, as well as
Uh-huh.
the faith dimension that goes
Uh-huh.
along with the service.
Uh-huh. Yeah, it's important, I think, particularly for young men who mature at a different rate than young women, and I think that there's a lot of evidence to say that to be able to have role models that they are side by side with more than just their fathers or their uncles, whatever, is extremely important because it's formative. So I'm delighted that that's there. And I was hoping, please God, in other councils, the squires will continue to grow because I almost see it kind of like as a mentoring program in service. Is that a fair way of putting it? Where you kind of guide them into things and into works of service and walk with them and teach them and give them inspiration, right? Is that right?
You know, what
Would
I
you
think
agree?
is really wonderful is that these are all very lay driven. Certainly they have our support, they have our encouragement, but we have incredible leadership skills in many of our parishioners who have been willing to take these ministries on. And so,
Hmm.
I make a visit at least once a year or maybe sometimes twice, depending, to make sure I,
Hmm.
get things started. But they
Right,
really have taken on a life of their own and
right,
have been very, very faithful, very, very
right,
faithful to the church and certainly to the parish and to the
right,
spirit of the
right.
ministry.
Right.
And,
So you were formed in the Vatican Council in seminary, but the spirit of the council, right, the radical call to holiness for everyone, right, and calling laity to assume their baptismal responsibilities in the church is basically the philosophy that you're following now, right?
absolutely. Yeah, that's very much a spirit. As I say, Fulton Sheen said to us, the council opened the doors and the windows, and he said they didn't do that just to get air. They did that to get you out. And
Yeah.
I think that's
Uh-huh.
very much the spirit I've tried to
Mm.
embrace.
Now, allow me to ask a sensitive question. And the sensitive question is, how did it feel turning 75?
Well, it was unbelievable actually because up in the head, I'm not 75. I just I
Hmm.
have a hard time that number. When you have these applications, and I'm now checking the last box. So those are the
Yeah.
times that kind of hit you. And realistically, I know how many years I have left on this earth. I don't know, but I certainly don't feel as if 75 is impeding me in any way. But it's
Hmm.
a big number, and all the people say 75 is the new 65. No, 75 is 75. And when you wake up, you never know what you're going to wake up to. You know, uh,
Right,
you just
right.
hope you're getting up. And
Right, right. But I heard, I wasn't there, of course, but I heard that your 75th birthday was quite the party. You want to fill us in on some of the details?
sure, well, I threw myself a big Oktoberfest.
Uh-huh.
And we had the Umpapa band. We had incredible food. I had a kind of a invitation only party at the Amber Room with 600 and some people. Uh, it was great. And then the next day we had a huge tent. We had over 1,000 people come for Oktoberfest on Sunday afternoon. So it was, you know what,
Unbelievable.
for me though, it was getting people out from the pandemic. So many of the
Hmm.
people, I was so happy to see so many of the older folks show up at this event, especially the one that was outside. And that was
Hmm.
really, it was more about that than my birthday, to be quite honest. I thought, let's get this parish moving again.
Right, right,
For a parish like ours that was so active to become so still was really a struggle to figure out how to get back on our feet again. And I thought
right,
maybe we'll use this as the occasion to do that. And thanks
right,
be to God,
right,
it stimulated.
right. We're going to talk about Sandy Hook when we come back from the break because that was a seminal moment in your personal life and the life of the parish and Newtown, the whole country, actually beyond the country in many ways, right? But one of the things that I think is fair to say, and I want you to either correct me or kind of expand, is St. Rose really is the parish is an anchor in Newtown in a way that is beautiful. It kind of is what parishes used to be, Catholic parishes, just about everywhere. But my sense is, even in the times we've celebrated the anniversary of that terrible tragedy, a lot revolves around St. Rose, right, in the city of Newtown. Is that fair to say?
Oh, I think definitely. I mean, we had a significant number of the funerals. But Newtown doesn't have a gathering place. We don't have we have a community center that was built as a gift from GE following this. But prior to that, we never really had a gathering space. So the churches, not just ours, but all the houses of worship became the places where people gathered. Our space is, of course, the largest in the town here. But we had people of all faiths. The mass we had the day that it happened, I got home from the firehouse around 5 o'clock. The mass was scheduled for 7, but at 5, the church was already full. And the police told me over 2,000 people were gathered outside the church. And we were able to set up speakers. But there were people just off in their corner singing Christmas carols, praying rosary, just being present to each other. But I would say, I think because of the number of funerals that were from our parish, and also because we've tried to be very welcoming community. And I think that drew people here without worrying about if they're Catholic or not. I mean, I think they just felt comfortable being in our church.
And you have made one of your hallmarks to reach out to the other churches in Newtown and the other religious leaders. You have a very good working relationship with all of them. Right?
That really is what sustained us, I think, especially during Sandy Hook, because many of the ministers did not have a funeral. So they were able to do the things that I couldn't do in terms of the other folks, the survivors and those families.
Right.
But yeah, we did have and it's truly interfaith. I will say Muslim, Baha'i, Jewish. It's not just ecumenical. It's truly interfaith.
Right, exactly. How post-pandemic? How has the pandemic affected Newtown apart from religion? More families have moved in. More. What's the consequence?
Yeah, I just heard a statistic that over 200 people sold their homes in Newtown and moved. And unfortunately, many of them were some of our best volunteers, and very active in the parish. We lost a significant number of lay leadership people. But the new families are moving in, and the new families are really kind of emerging. I think they were, well, first of all, moving from a city to a town where there's the roads are 2 lanes and everything shuts down at 9 o'clock at night. That's probably enough to keep them home, but now they're coming out more and more. And it's wonderful to see the number of young families. When I first came here, this parish was primarily young families when all the corporations were still in the area. And families are moving in and moving out constantly. So we're back to that. We have families with 9 children, 8 children, families with 7 children, and many young families at 4 or 5 children. So it's wonderful to see the generation coming back again.
So GE, in the old days, a lot of the GE employees lived in Newtown.
It was GE, it was Pepsi, it was I forgot the computer company. I'm sorry, put a blank. But yeah, there were a number of corporations in this area, and then when they closed their headquarters in this area, we lost many families. It was constant transitioning. Right.
So when you look back on your 50 years of priestly ministry, what is, of all the things you've done, of all the things you've been involved in, what is the one that you look most fondly upon looking back on all those years? Was it youth ministry? Or something else?
One thing that's often said about me is that I don't identify people by their wealth or their position in life, or that I try to treat everyone equal. And to me, I don't do that deliberately. It's just who I am. To be quite honest, if you were to ask me who supports the parish financially, I probably could not tell you. I free myself of that. And I'm often accused, of wearing rose-colored glasses, and I'll say something about a person. I'll say, "Oh, you don't really know them. You should know what they." I don't need to know that. I know them as I know them, and I think that's one thing I think that I could be fairly proud of, because it's opened so much to me. It's opened so much understanding. I'm finding myself now, with everything going on in the world, everything going on in the church. I'm trying to understand. There's a lot of confusion and there's a lot of things changing again, but I'm trying my best to understand, and I don't always accept it that well, but I'm trying to understand where it's coming from.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yes, we are in a period of another transition, without a doubt.
Yeah.
And it's almost, Steve and I have talked about this many times. It's almost as if we are now in a consolidation phase, so that the things of, I call it the old and the new, are coming together to marry. And that means some of what was new probably didn't work as well as we had thought, in which case we're going to lay aside. And some of that which we consider quote unquote old, that we jettisoned looking back and said we should not have. So it's kind of like a great settling process. The interesting thing is the Vatican Council, the Second Vatican Council, is the only council so far that hasn't had a significant schism in the life of the church, which is interesting. And I think part of that, one day we could talk about, try to explain why maybe some of the reasons behind that. I think technology is one of the reasons that has actually helped ventilate some of those differences. But I understand your point. We're in a period of transition again. Yeah. And please God, it will help us to grow, right? Sure. Stabilize the church and help us to grow. But it's hard to go through because you don't exactly sure where the Holy Spirit's leading us, right? So I think we're up for a break. And when we come back, I do want to raise a very sensitive question about Sandy Hook and the upcoming anniversary.
Sure. This is Let Me Be Frank on the Veritas Catholic Network. His Excellency is speaking with Monsignor Robert Weiss, pastor of St. Rose of Lima in Newtown, Connecticut, and we will be right back.
If you're concerned about your end-of-life plans, searching for a Catholic cemetery, or have loved ones who are buried in one of the 14 Catholic cemeteries throughout Fairfield County, now might be a good time to begin planning for yourself or for other family members. Call one of our family advisors at 203-742-1450 and select option 5 to leave a message, or visit www.ctcemeteries.org. Many people don't realize that they can be buried with their deceased loved ones, even if all of the family's in-ground plots have been taken. The Diocese of Bridgeport Catholic Cemeteries provides in-ground burials, as well as columbarium and mausoleum options. This makes it possible to unite your family together in the same cemetery, and it's an opportunity to build a bridge for your family back to the church. Talking about this issue is not easy, but pre-need planning makes your wishes clear, reduces cost, and helps your family avoid difficult decisions at a time of grief and loss. You can start your planning now by contacting one of our family advisors at 203-742-1450 and select option 5, or visit www.ctcemeteries.org. We can guide you through the options, regulations, and considerations to help you make the best decisions for your family. The number is 203-742-1450 and select option 5, or visit www.ctcemeteries.org.
Okay, welcome back to Let Me Be Frank on the Veritas Catholic Network. His Excellency Bishop Caggiano has been speaking with Monsignor Robert Weiss, the pastor of St. Rose of Lima in Newtown, who pastored it and shepherded his community through the tragedy 10 years ago at Sandy Hook. Excellency?
Well, Monsignor, first of all, as I've said to you many times, I and everyone in our diocese and beyond is deeply grateful for all that you did 10 years ago and in the 10 years that have since passed, when that awful, indescribable tragedy occurred, when all of those youngsters, were killed. And it really is a testimony to your priesthood, that you stood in the midst of so much suffering and so many tears, and many times just to hold a hand or hug or wipe a tear or just to be present, right? To allow God's mercy to be present to these people. And I know it has taken a tremendous personal toll on you. So I raise it simply because it is the anniversary is coming up, right? In just about a week, a little less than, well, maybe a week and a day, right? A week and 2 days. And so I'm going to open the floor. I know there's much on your heart about this. Tell us 10 years later, what's your reflections on the tragedy itself, this milestone that we're arriving at 10 years? What's on your heart after all of this?
I think you just said the one word for me in this whole 10 years has been presence. I realized very soon I didn't have the words, I didn't have the professionalism, I didn't have anything to really bring to help move this forward, except to be consistent and to be present to as many people as I could be. I certainly am grateful for the opportunity I had to be involved in this. I mean, I didn't ask for it, but it just showed me so much of life, and showed me so much about the dark as well as the light. So
Hmm.
I think, in terms of 10 years, we've kind of taken our lead, I believe, from the families. Some of them have just done absolutely incredible things to honor their children and to honor their loved
Hmm.
ones. And I think when you see how they're living their lives in the midst of their tragedy, their loss, it just reminds us, how important it is to be there for each other, to be supportive of each other. There's
Hmm.
always going to be division at a time like this, and there certainly is division among the families. But nevertheless, they're doing the best they can in the midst of all this, and we're doing the best we can to continue to support them. I have realized, however, that a lot of our young people really were not given the opportunity they needed to process this and to heal through this. When
Hmm.
this happened, there's a tendency in America that let's do something. And so every day, we were getting tennis shoes, we were getting basketballs, we were getting soccer balls. We had professional teams visiting us. We had free tickets to Disney World, free tickets to Yankee Stadium, and all those things I think kind of took us away from what we should have stayed focused on. And as a result, I've seen so many of our older teens and younger adults who were in school at that time really suffering emotionally from this. Many of them, a few years ago, came home from college. A lot of them went back with therapy dogs. They just being away from family, being insecure about life, feeling safe. I think there were a lot of issues. I know one young man in particular. I was at dinner at their house, and he confronted his father, and he said, you were so busy uh, going around worrying about everybody else. You never asked me once how I was doing. And it was an amazing conversation that ensued following that. But I'm very
Hmm.
concerned about the young people, especially in junior high. They were the ones that are asking the hard questions. They were the ones
Right.
asking, how could God let this happen? And the high schoolers. And I'm not sure we paid enough attention, even though I think we all tried. But, resources were limited. And we try to get back to life uh, and don't take the time we need to grieve or to really focus on the sadness we're feeling.
Hmm. Hmm. Monsignor, is the original building where the tragedy happened, was that closed?
Well, it was closed and was demolished, and a new school has been built on that site. Yeah,
Right.
but the remnants of it was done beautifully, to be quite honest, Bishop. It was done kind of very secretively, because they didn't want people coming in there wanting a brick for souvenirs. Some of that nonsense that
Hmm.
goes on. They would have been online selling bricks from Sandy Hook School. So it was
Right.
done in a
Right.
very beautiful way, and then the new building was put up thanks to the generosity of the state.
Right. Wow. So I was wondering about that. Actually, you anticipated one of my questions because those who actually witnessed this tragedy, right, with their class, were literally in the classrooms, would be how old now? That what they were, wouldn't they be 16 or
Yeah,
17 years
they're
old
heading
now?
toward junior senior year.
Yeah. So they had to go through that tragedy, process that, and as you say, and then go through the rest of growing up, which is always tumultuous for all of us, for all humanity, right?
Absolutely.
So I was wondering if they have stayed together, like in touch with one another. Do you know?
I think with the 10 years, a lot of things have changed. A lot of priorities have changed. New people have moved into Newtown. Um, there was a lot of bonding definitely going on during that time. There was no doubt
Hmm.
about it. This is not a town where there's many families that have extended families. Very few of these children have grandparents that live here. So, friends are very important in this community. But as time goes on, as children get older, activities change, those relationships change. But it's still a town where friendship is extremely important. And
Right.
you know, for those of us who were here during this, there's still kind of I don't know if it's a secret thing, but you can just you just know. Even to this day, if I'm in Starbucks or in line to Starbucks, I'll get to the window today, well, the car behind you is paying for your iced tea today. Or if I'm in CVS, somebody walked up to me after 9 years, 10 years later and say, I never really got an opportunity to thank you. So, I mean, for those of us who were here and lived through it, I think that the bond of the community is strong.
Right. Monsignor, when the tragedy occurred, you were already pastor. How long at St. Rose?
I was there 13 years.
Yeah. So you had already had a relationship with everyone. People already knew you. They were comfortable with you. They trusted you. That's where they relied on. You were immediately the person they came to.
Sure. Yeah, I was the
Right.
first clergy to be at the site. And, many of those children who died went to our preschool, actually, and then
Mm-hmm.
transferred over to public school for kindergarten. So the families were not strangers by any means to me.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I guess I'm out there more than I should be out there. I don't know, but from the diner and from the restaurants and from shopping, people pretty much know who I am. So, I'm not an unfamiliar face. You're correct when it comes to that.
Right. Exactly. You were the first clergy person on
Yeah,
site.
one of my parishioners was a custodian there, and he called me and he said, Father Bob, if you can get down here, I really wish you would. I had no idea what was going on until I actually got to the driveway, and the state police officer asked me if I would go down to the school and bless the children. And I said, well, what happened? And then he told me there was a massacre. He didn't know the extent of it yet, so he escorted me down to the school building. But when I got there, excuse me, the front door was shot open. I mean, the glass was on the ground, and I looked in. I could see the feet of Adam, and I could see the blood. And I thought to myself, whoever's in there is a saint. I need to be with the other children who had been brought to the firehouse. So I did not go in. I walked right back to the firehouse to be with families. And at that point, all the children who were there being picked up by their parents. And then when all the names were called and you could see the families whose child didn't respond standing against the back wall, you knew that they were probably not going to be there. So we were
Oh
all
my
moved into a
gosh.
back room at the firehouse until the governor came at 3:00. And then at one police officer told me at noon that the governor was coming at 3 to make the announcement so I could get the rest of the clergy down there. So we were able
Right.
to rally them rather
Right.
quickly.
Right. Right. And I'm almost sorry to ask you to recount all of these things because they are, I know, very painful. But for those who are listening, and myself included, who are not there, right, personally there, history has a way of just becoming very anesthetized. So it just becomes an historical fact that this happened and these young people died. But when you actually go and listen to the story and the stories, then the true depth and breadth of the evil that was done and the tragedy that occurred and the consequences become much clearer, right?
Yes.
That's what history is really should be, a narrative of story, not just facts, right? So I appreciate you sharing what you're sharing about what happened. That first evening then, after the governor came, there was a press service, was there not, for everyone?
Um, when I left the firehouse, I couldn't even get to my car. There were so much media, and asking, the one question they asked me repeatedly, have I lost my faith in God because of this? And I never expected that question to be asked. I say no, but my trust in humanity is certainly being challenged right now. That one of our own, one of our own kids from this town could do something like this destructive was amazing to me. But
Right.
and then getting back to the church and seeing all these people, I thought to myself, we really need each other now more than any before. And there was lots of, you can imagine, the tears and the
Oh my gosh, hysterics. And actually numbness, I would think. People who just couldn't react.
Right.
You don't know how to react.
Right. Yeah,
Right.
it certainly was an overwhelming experience. Then, on that following Sunday to have a threat against our church, just how much more, you keep asking yourself as more details were coming out, and then to receive a phone call that someone was on their way to shoot up our church. Luckily it was a hoax, but we had to stop mass. I had to get the people to quietly get to their cars. We had to live with the SWAT team for the rest of that week. It was you just wonder how much more, what is going on in the minds of people, because this was about domestic violence with him killing his mother, was about mental health issues, and certainly was about gun violence. it touched on all those issues. I mean, look at ourselves 10 years later. Where are we? Those issues are more well known, but they're increasing. And
Absolutely.
I was naive enough to think this was going to change the world. I really was. I thought, who could look at this and do what this
Right.
young man did? But you know what? It was just a matter of 2 weeks later that another incident
Right.
happened, and it's continued.
And of course, now with COVID and post COVID or intra COVID, whatever you want to call it, and the mental illness and the stresses and anxieties that young people have gone through, and everyone has gone through, the incidents are accelerating. We hear it now. It's like almost every week
Right.
there's something going on somewhere. In countries, even in countries where that sort of violence was unheard of.
Right.
But now it's just to your point. You would hope that good would come of it, but that good is only going to come with the conversion of our hearts and be able to help people who need help, and call a spade a spade. If a person's mentally ill, they are not capable of making a choice whether or not they need help. They have to get help. They have to be given help, right?
Yeah.
It's funny, if I may just say this. I was a young man with the Willowbrook. Remember the whole episode on Staten Island and the mental health facility and the disaster. It was obscene what was done to those individuals who were supposedly getting mental health. And we've gone to the opposite extreme now. But we have to find, like everything else we said about consolidation in the church, we have to get help. I can't imagine what this young man was thinking when he made the final decision to go out and first kill his mother and then go on. I mean, how dark is that dark place?
Yeah. Bishop, he attended our school in 7th grade. And 7th grade, our language arts, they journal. And the teacher came to me with this journal, and it was all black, white, and red. He had written a book when he was, I believe, in 4th grade called Grandma's Day Out, of a man dressed like an old woman going around shooting people. So, the signs were there. And I'm not going to judge anyone, but his mental state at a very early age, he was quirky. He was a very bright kid. But, he had one of those pocket things with his pens. He carried a briefcase, just didn't work in 7th grade. But our kids, and I think most of the kids in every class he was in tried to be good to him. But the illness was too strong and too deep.
Yeah. Wow. Monsignor, of all those who died, how many of the funerals did you celebrate personally?
Well, I did 8 funerals here in the church, and I did 1 service at a funeral home.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
yeah, it was so compressed because it was the week before Christmas, and we had most of the wakes were at the church as well as the burials were in our cemetery. Just trying to get all of that organized. Thanks be to God for the community here at our parish. I will never be able to really appreciate what was going on without my knowing it. Just the Knights of Columbus directing traffic, and our Columbiettes out there, putting their arms around people, hugging them, tissues flying everywhere. It was an incredible scene. It was an absolutely incredible scene.
Absolutely. For those who have never been to St. Rose, one of the consequences of the tragedy there was the creation of that group that you have now with the red shirts.
Right.
Right. So tell us about that. What is that group?
Sure. Well, when we started school again, and we realized that when school was in session, there was security. But when the children were leaving the schools to come here for religious education, there was no security. And the police were not able to provide it. So we had an attorney who came to me and said, I'm going to work on developing a volunteer security force. And so he did all the legal work on it. We worked with the police department. And so we have about 35 men and 2 women who we call them, they either wear a red shirt or a red jacket to distinguish themselves, who are here every time, not just religious ed, anytime that involves young people. So when you're here for confirmation, you'll see the red shirts.
Yep.
First Holy Communion. Anytime there's a youth event, these folks are incredible. And they're better than the post office, I'll tell you. Nothing stops them. Doesn't matter what the weather is, they're on duty. Yeah, it's amazing. They are armed, which was a little concern of mine initially, but they do take training every year. They are tested every year. So thanks be to God, we've never had to get to a point like that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a new era. I remember, I think you told me if we didn't have police, we might as well close our school. And
Right.
how
Right.
true that
Right.
is. That's one of the first
Yeah.
questions people ask.
Right, right, of course, because particularly those who live in Newtown and have lived through this, everyone's different. Everyone has changed because of it. Everyone, I could use the word scarred, but everybody is wounded in some way. The world is never going to be the same, and we have to respond to that in a legitimate way. Monsignor, of all the families, how many are you still in contact with who are like local? Are there many left?
Well,
or have
I'm
they
still
moved?
I'm still in contact with a lot of the families. Many of them have not come back to church. Two have left the parish to go to another parish. They just found it too hard to walk into the church, which is one reason we did the renovation. Hopefully, to change somewhat of the interior. But
Mm-hmm.
3 or 4 of the families are still very active here.
Mm-hmm.
But you see them around town. There's still a relationship that exists.
Yeah, I was wondering because for the parents, right, who lost their children, this must have been a crisis of faith in some way, or at least a crisis, right, that is unparalleled, right, in probably any parent's life. And how they dealt with it and how in some way they sought healing in their relationship with the Lord and the church and all the rest. And it's, I'm sure it's a different story for every person, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's and we still have, you'll see some during the day, they'll come in. I leave the church open 24/7. There's an area where people can come in and sometimes there are families over at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning. Some of them are over there praying. And there's see some of the moms come during the day and light a candle. The kneelers in the church are all the children. So they kind of kneel on their child's kneeler and in quiet and private.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Mhm.
Oh, the Neil is. Oh, okay. Wow. Well, the renovation is beautiful.
Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. And now you're going to do a little bit more, I think.
Yes,
No?
we were too ardent in our sanitizing and had a product that had chlorine that did a number on our carpet. So we're going to be replacing it.
Yeah, but without carpet, which is probably
We're doing
probably
porcelain
nicer.
floor. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, which would be. Wow. Well, I thank you for the opportunity to join you in prayer on the anniversary.
No,
Right.
I'm grateful you're coming.
Oh yeah, no, I yes, of course, and that's the one other thing I wanted to alert our listeners to. During the time when this crisis and tragedy occurred, there was no bishop
Right.
in the diocese, right?
Correct.
So what would have naturally happened, that would have been the pastor, yourself, and the service, and then whatever the bishop could have done to help, that was missing.
Correct.
Right?
We had some significant support from the Catholic Center, especially Catholic Charities, and the HR department. They were terrific. But yeah, it was pretty much left up to us to get through this.
Right. Which made the service even more important, but the burden even bigger. Right. To which I'm grateful.
I had an incredible staff here. I think Sunday night it dawned on me, like, we've got to get meeting with these families. And on Monday we went out 2 by 2, my entire staff, to each home. I put a form together for them to fill out the names of the grandparents and nicknames and favorite things that children like to do. I said to them, I don't want to violate the liturgy, but whatever is important to these families, excuse me,
Right.
We're going to do it. So we had a couple of hokey country western songs in the liturgy, but every casket had an American Girl doll or a basketball or a football or something so important to the life of that child. And we really strove to do the best we could to help it reflect the life of that young person. And, the eulogies were given by the mothers at 7 of the 8 funerals.
Really?
Yeah.
That's remarkable.
It was incredible to see these women get up there and tell the story of their child. Yep.
Wow. And it's wow. That is amazing. That is amazing. Wow.
I do.
Steve, did you have a question?
Monsignor. So I know that in the wake of that massacre, there was a priest in Scotland who reached out to you because he had gone through something similar. And I imagine, like His Excellency has said earlier, that, these kind of tragic events keep happening. And so I imagine that you're being reached out to. What did the priest in Scotland say to you? And what are you telling other community leaders and pastors who are facing similarly horrific, things in their communities?
Sure. Yeah. Monsignor O'Sullivan from Scotland called me and or emailed me, and our office was 24/7. We had a lot of volunteers taking emails and phone calls and things like that. And one of the parishioners came to me and said, "You really ought to look at this email." And it was from Basil, and he had been through a school shooting in his own community, not to the extent that we were experiencing, but very similar. And it just said to me, like, number one, you're not alone. Sorry. It's then that I realized the universality and the beauty of the Catholic Church, because we were hearing from priests, and the Holy Father sent an email. It was very appreciated. But he did say, my best advice for you is take 2 weeks vacation as soon as these things are over, and be by yourself. But well, first of all, it was Christmas. The other thing was that I think you probably know, we were overwhelmed with packages and cards and things that were just coming to us day after day after day, which had to be processed and had to be dealt with, especially the monetary gifts that were coming in. So I didn't really take that advice probably as maybe I should have, but it was just great to hear from him. We've developed a wonderful relationship. He's retired. His parishioners bought him a little cottage in his town, so he's still very present to the parish where he was assigned. And he really has been a great support for me. He did come here for the first anniversary, actually, and just spoke so eloquently to the families and to the parish in general. Yeah.
Oh, he did?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know. Oh, wow. Tremendous. So my only other question to you is, what are you planning once the 10th anniversary is celebrated? You had mentioned to me you have some ideas. I'm not sure you're able to share them yet, but some ideas to add to the church, some sort of healing monument, something that would raise up the beauty of healing, right? It may be too early to say, in which case we could skip over that.
Sure. Well, just a few weeks ago, a parishioner approached me that he had a beautiful painting of St. Raphael, and he would like to donate it to the church. And I went to look at it, and it's really quite beautiful. And ironically, it's from an artist in Lima, Peru, he said it made natural sense for him to be housed here. We had an area that was our penance room. It was originally the baptismal font when the church was built, a baptismal area, I'm sorry. And a kind of an artificial wall was put up. So we're going to make it a chapel of healing. We have a book in our church where we invite people to come in and write any intention they would like for those who are ill or those. And we also have the Elizabeth Ministry that's active here. So I thought this would be a beautiful space. It's a beautiful painting. So we'll kind of consolidate all of that as an area where people can come and pray for healing.
Tremendous. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Okay, so let's take one more break, Excellency and Monsignor. This is Let Me Be Frank on the Veritas Catholic Network, having a conversation with Monsignor Robert Weiss, pastor of St. Rose of Lima Church, about the 10-year anniversary of Sandy Hook. But we're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back.
Hey, it's Matt from Restless on the Veritas Catholic Radio Network. Each week on Restless, we young adults restlessly seek the face of Christ in today's crazy and mixed-up world. Join us each Friday at noon on 1350 AM, 103.9 FM, the Veritas app, or wherever you get your shows. Hope to see you there.
All right, welcome back to Let Me Be Frank with Bishop Frank Caggiano. Excellency, here is today's listener question. It says, Happy Advent. I have a question for Bishop Frank. What is the version of the Bible we should use, and what is the difference between different versions For example, my Bible is the New American Version. I have my uncle's from 1955 called the Red Letter Version, and there's the Gideon Bible as well.
There's lots of translations of the Bible, okay, but the one we use liturgically is the New American Bible. So the one she has is exactly the one she should be using, and I believe it's also in the Revised Version now. The difference is, well, among the Catholic editions, the differences are the translation from the original languages, right? Between Catholics and non-Catholic Christian versions, it's the actual books are different, as we know, which we've talked about. No, but the New American would be the one I recommend to everyone, the Revised Version or the study version of the New American Bible.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think she mentioned the Red Letter Version. I think that's just any translation that has Jesus's words in red letters. So, yeah.
Could be. I didn't allude to it because I wasn't sure what it is. I've never heard of it before.
I have, personally speaking, I have the Revised Standard Version on my bookshelf. So,
that's fine too.
As long as it has 73 books, we're good to go, right, Excellency?
Exactly.
All right.
Exactly.
Okay, so if you have a question for Bishop Frank, you can send it in to us on social media, or you can email questions@veritascatholic.com. Bishop Frank Caggiano is on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and so is Veritas Catholic Network. And we would like to thank Foundations in Faith. It's a grant from the St. Therese Fund for Evangelization that makes it possible for us to bring Let Me Be Frank to you. Foundations in Faith is committed to supporting and transforming pastoral ministries in the Diocese of Bridgeport, and you can learn more about their outstanding work at foundationsinfaith.org. And Monsignor Weiss, thank you so much for your priesthood and for your guidance for the community and for joining us here today.
Thank you.
Amen. I say amen to that.
Thank you, Bishop.
We actually, and we have one of your parishioners, Jenny Hubbard, who's joining Joe and Joe on tomorrow's episode of The Frontline. So it's, anyway, so you'll certainly be in our prayers for the tenure and everything. Mm-hmm. Excellency, before we go, would you please give us your blessing?
Yes, of course, of course. In the name of the Father, of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. We turn to you, Heavenly Father, God of mercy and consolation. We ask that your Holy Spirit bless Monsignor Weiss, bless the wonderful staff and the people of St. Rose, and give them courage and perseverance and strength and peace of mind and heart as we celebrate the 10th anniversary of the tragedy that we've been speaking about. But in your arms, our departed are now in their peace. And so we ask that you give us that peace and bless all that we do and say, that it may give you honor and glory. And may the blessing of Almighty God, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit come upon you and remain with you forever.
Amen.
Amen. Monsignor, I will see you at St. Rose.
Yes.
For the anniversary. I look forward to it. Steve, I'll see you next week.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Monsignor.
Thank you.
God bless.
Thank you.